Welcome to the 4 o'clock work session of the Bowling Green Board of Commissioners for May 1st, 2012. On the work session, we have 2 items for discussion. Mr. DeFebo, I think the first one is a request for proposals to implement a voice over internet protocol telephone system.
Thank you, Mayor. As we all know, other than a computer, maybe equally so, the telephone still remains one of our important tools used in our work environment to do the work of the people. A number of months ago, we went through a rather difficult period here in the city in which our phone system, we were experiencing some deep problems with that system. And we made at that point a decision to talk to you at retreat about us looking at going to voice over IP almost immediately. We had talked about going to voice over IP approximately 3 years ago, but we hit our recession issues, and so we had to put it in abeyance for a while. But the confluence of the problems we experienced, as well as the need to upgrade our technology, and we believe the affordability of it, it's reached a point where all the stars are in line. We're ready to move forward. I asked Lynn to put together a RFP and to develop a committee approach to creating a solution for the voice over IP. And I think he's here today to share with you the work of the committee and to identify for you the strategy and RFP we're going to put out to the bidding public. Lynn?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Really appreciate your time. I'm going to try to go quickly through this. I know your time is valuable. And then if any questions on this at all, just I have Bobby Joe here, and there's other members of the committee not able to make it doing their usual functions, but we have a good committee, I think. So go through this, and then again, if you have any questions. First of all, as Mr. DeFebo alluded to, we actually did have an RFP several years ago. And the downturn in the economy, we felt at the time it was not prudent to go forward, not knowing what all we would be running into with the economy. Recently, though, as he mentioned, we've had a number of major issues with the current phone system. Really and truly, it's, and so why do we do this now? One of the things is that besides a lot of the problems with the current phone system, it's approximately 15 years old. And it's really a number of disparate systems that are kind of pieced together. It's very difficult to get parts in some cases. It's just old and needs to be replaced. And voice over IP, of course, is the current technology. We're probably actually behind the curve, to be frank about that. Most companies have already gone in this direction. So it's just the right time. And some of the rationale, I guess, for going forward, first of all, besides all of the normal things you would expect from any phone system, being call forwarding or voicemail, whatever it may be, there's some added, a good bit of added functionality. I'll just hit on several of them here. One being the ability to interface with your email system, which is pretty convenient thing to have either on your desktop or mobile. Also have some options sitting at your desk for video call conferencing, which is something we don't have now. There's also a thing called soft phone. So basically you could take just a USB headset and use it at your PC and talk over the phone just as if you would, like kind of like a Skype thing, but you're actually using your work phone. Also in that regard, there are, whereas now you have to go to the phone itself and do a lot of setup for your greetings, voicemail, that type thing, there will be a lot of things that an end user will be able to do on their PC and configure things basically like on a website where you go in, sign in, and you can configure personal settings just sitting at your PC. Also mobility, obviously that's becoming more and more prevalent. People are carrying a number of devices around. There's some features in the phone system that will essentially allow, and again, this is a user preference thing, but it will allow people to be tracked down by one phone number. Regardless of where they are, you can reach them. And it will have kind of like I guess I would think of it almost like a calendar kind of a thing in email. You can actually, if people take the time to set things up, you can even know ahead of time if you're going to call somebody, whether or not they're available or not. So a lot of new features that are included with the voice over IP. Another major thing is the savings, and I think even without the savings, just the current system really needs to go. It needs to be replaced. So I think just the added functionality, even on a break-even kind of a thing, it's probably worth it. But the savings come basically in three categories. We have currently there are annual maintenance fees on some of the equipment we have now. That will go away. There will be some equipment maintenance charges on the new software and hardware beginning in year 2, but the first year that won't be there. So some of that will kind of be an offset there after year 1. The consulting services, what I'm talking about here is right now there's a lot of times when a phone moves, changes, those type things, those have to be outsourced, so there's a charge for that. Voice over IP allows the ease of pretty much just point and click and making phone changes. It will be done within IT, primarily with our help desk, just handling those kind of calls just like a normal call. They can sit at their desk and make most of the changes. So those charges will go away. The major savings, though, will be the fact that we have a majority of our phones right now are connected via Centrex lines. And it's a little difficult to explain, but essentially we will have what will amount to several trunk lines that will come into the annex building and connect to the new, what's called a call manager. And so we have our infrastructure in place, so the new phone system will work on our existing data infrastructure, which is already there. So all of these lines that we're currently paying, AT&T will be able to cancel those. That's where the majority of the savings is coming from. And in looking at, and I don't know if you guys have ever seen any of the billing, I've tried as best I can to get a good figure on this, but I worked with Bobby Joe recently. We had a conference call with AT&T, and then I also sat down with someone who's very familiar with the worked with phone company in the past. And our monthly bill is like over 100 pages, and that's not long distance, that's just the regular bill. There's all these codes in there and everything, but I think conservatively it looks like there should be a minimum of about $75,000 a year that we will be able to save, get rid of. I think that's a conservative estimate. I think it'll actually be more. Some of that's going to depend on how the RFP really pans out and what features we put in, the upfront costs, but more it'll be once we really sit down and start canceling things and finding out everything that's maybe some things that are in the bill that we don't exactly know what they are right now. But again, I think 75 is a pretty safe estimate. And along that lines, I think we had actually done an ROI study several years ago, and it was estimated that it would pay for itself in probably 3 to 4 years. I'm guessing realistically it may be closer to 5, but there's definitely a point probably around the 5-year mark where it will pay for itself, and then the savings will continue each year. And then moving on to why not just voice over IP, but Cisco voice over IP. They are the recognized world leader. But more than that, I think a couple of things that we've done is with the city of Bowling Green, we have standardized pretty much on Cisco infrastructure, and we also have a lot of HP equipment. It makes our job from a support standpoint much easier when we're standardized. It also means that once whoever wins the bid and once their job is over, our support will go back to Cisco. And if we have a problem, we need to call them, regardless of whether there's an issue with the network, anything like that. We won't have to make 2 or 3 calls and get 2 or 3 vendors to work together. There won't be any finger pointing. Our entire infrastructure will be pretty much Cisco based. So that's one of the reasons we went there. There's also quite a bit of a number of Cisco systems in the area and a lot of expertise in the area, so I don't think we'll have any problem finding a good vendor there'll probably be a good many to choose from here. And I don't really like giving credit to Auburn Alabama, especially on anything much, but I'm keep in touch with those guys. There's a IT director down there I talk with quite a bit. They've been on a Cisco system for about 10 years now and still have pretty much the same phones they started with, so it's a very, very stable system.
Lynn, may I interrupt you just a
Sure.
second? You said after 5 years it should be beneficial for us. The longevity of the system you estimate would be how long?
Well, again, I've in checking with some of the others, you know, phones are pretty solid. The phones, physical phones themselves, we probably won't put on maintenance. We'll just keep some spares. But again, when I talked with the guy in Auburn, they've had phones the same phones pretty much for 10 years.
Okay.
We will pay an annual maintenance, so any software, it'll almost be like a regular software package in some ways. The hardware and software, the core system, we will have under maintenance, and so any upgrades, that'll just be included in that. So it's been around a long time, and we should be able to get upgrades as we go along rather than have to pay for that, you know, outside the annual maintenance. Does that answer?
Right. So you're thinking that the savings would be a minimum of $75,000, even when you figure in maintenance and the different things you mentioned?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
And again, that will continue every year, and I think it will be. I would be surprised if, you know, if I worked till retirement, I'd be surprised if the system's not still here then. Obviously, there's a point in time where there'll likely be another technology. I mean, a lot of people are, you know, more and more mobile devices. That could be potential down the road, but I think this is definitely the right move for this time. The city approach, again, as Mr. DeFebo alluded to earlier, we had a number of issues several months ago, and to the point I think we were a little concerned that we might have to do something rather quick, but fortunately things kind of stabilized now, although it's still, like I say, an old system, but it's somewhat stabilized. So we felt the best approach would be to put together a committee and issue an RFP to make sure we get the best bidder out there who can do the work. Frankly, right now Bobby Joe handles the phones. Once we implement voice over IP, it will become an IT supported product. We really don't have the expertise, so this is not a typical project for us. We tend to buy things and then put them in ourselves. This is a case where we are buying the goods and the services. So we want, it's complete turnkey. Someone will come in, they will look at and give us what they think is the best options and configure it for us, and then do the transfer of knowledge, and then we'll go forward supporting that. And being that it's hits every employee, we wanted to make sure we put together I think a pretty good committee, not too big, not too little, but the right people and they've been very valuable giving us input. It's easy to overlook a lot of things. We had a couple people in the IT department who basically went around to all the departments and did kind of site survey, looked to see what phones were there, but there's still a lot of things that was easy to overlook, especially I know Kevin Wiles contributed quite a bit from police, things over there that we might not have known otherwise. So it's really a good thing from that standpoint. And I'll go back to something Mr. DeFebo mentioned earlier too about the importance of phones. I sit fairly close to Bobby Joe, and you know, people do complain when email goes down or something, but I've kind of seen her have to deal with phone situation, and people really get upset still when their land phones go down. That's just something you expect to be up. So it's something we take very seriously, and I don't think I've ever seen Bobby Joe smile as much though as she has the last few weeks, knowing that this is going to slide over, but we'll think we'll be up to the challenge. These are the people that are on the committee, and again, our plan is to issue the RFP. All of these people will be involved in the evaluation and kind of selecting. Once we get through that process, come back to you all to award the bid, then there will be several people in IT who will be involved on a regular basis in working with the vendor on the installation, and then other people who will learn the day-to-day functions. And then, of course, end-user training. There's a whole lot of features with voice over IP. We're not planning on hitting everybody with too much at once. We'll just put the basic functions in probably, and then start rolling out other features. But it's a really good group to work with, and they've contributed quite a bit to this so far.
Lynn, what consideration did you give, or if any, to the state pricing contract? Or is it available in state pricing?
It is available. Now, typically, the state contracts are primarily for goods only, but if you purchase goods in a high enough volume, you can get services with that. The problem I saw with that, going that direction, it looked like there was some consideration for that. Again, based on the problems we were having with the current system, but things finally settled down. My preference has always been, I think you guys may or may not know, but I've probably gone state contract 3 or 4 times just for goods only when I felt like that pricing was going to be about as good as I could get on an RFP anyhow. But a project like this, when you've got services included, I think it just makes sense to, if we've got the time, to take that time and make sure we can evaluate everybody and pick the best one, because we get one shot at doing this. So. Does that answer your question? I mean,
Yeah, we looked at this actually when we put the expansion on the PD, going to it. It's quite a system. It's a good system. Just couldn't afford it.
And I don't know that I put this in the notes anywhere, but just to make sure you guys know too, we're not doing anything with dispatch. They have their own phone system. Melissa Carter pretty much handles that for both the main dispatch center and Greenwood. There are some functions that kind of interface with the current phone system, and we are making sure in the RFP that's part of the bid that that functionality will still be there. So.
And I guess one last question. If we go through this process and you see that the state pricing would be a better deal for the city, you can come back and go that route if you want to, can't you?
Well, certainly we could. I mean, there are options. I would expect that I'd have to go back and look at the list, Bill, but I believe that there's probably maybe a dozen or so vendors who are on a couple of different contracts that is supported by the state. I would expect the majority of those will probably bid on this anyhow. So in that case, I'd be surprised if we could get better pricing. One thing about this system, though, that there, again, we kind of feel like we get one shot, let's do it right and get the best we can. But there is some flexibility in here, in that there's a number of options that if we see that we're cutting it close on the budget or something, there are some things that we could put off or add in later or just take out. So there's plenty of flexibility to get the base in and add later if we need to. It's a system, really one system, core system that can grow pretty easily, unlike kind of what we have now. So. And again, just kind of where we are, we did do some preliminary work. The switches that we bought this past year have now been implemented, all except for annex building, and that will be done fairly soon. That really wasn't done specifically for voice over IP. It was just done because it was time. We needed new equipment. But the fact that those are in there, that has upgraded our infrastructure, our network, so that the impact of voice over IP running over our data network will be minimal. So we've already upgraded the network for that. We've also had to add some new data drops. I'm not sure, I want to make sure you understand basically what will happen is the voice over IP phone will connect into the existing data port where someone's desktop PC connects now. And then it will have its own port, if you will, so that the PC will connect to the phone will connect to the data drop. So they'll actually still only use the one data drop that's existing, and PC and phone will both work off of that device, off of that drop, I mean. So we did have to run a few new drops because there's places, for instance, in break rooms, that kind of thing, where there's phones but no PCs. So that's already been taken care of. And we've upgraded some of the UPS systems. Those are basically the power backups in some of the closets. The voice over IP phones do rely on power, but they will be able to get the power they need actually from, it's called power over Ethernet, so they would actually get their power from the switch itself and not be plugged into the wall. Of course, the problem there is if you lose power, your phone can go out. So what we've done is basically upgrade our backup systems in a lot of the closets. So hopefully, even if a facility doesn't have a generator or a huge UPS, the UPS that's in the closets will be able to carry them for at least 30 minutes to an hour. So short little spurts and outages shouldn't be a problem. And there's a lot of redundancy that's also built into the system. We recognize you want to make sure that the core system goes down. There'll still be at least a limited number of people who can still make their calls in and out. So that was one strong consideration was for redundancy. And again, we do have the RFP is ready, which I believe you all have a copy of. And kind of in conclusion, just the RFP itself, we did have an equipment list, but there is some flexibility there in a number of things that we wasn't very specific on that they can quote on. The core system itself, as an example, doesn't come with paging. That was very important, so there's some options there that can work with it. So there's some things that are kind of fixed and some that are pretty flexible that they'll be able to bid on. Another thing was the evaluation criteria. We did put pretty good emphasis on cost, obviously, but we also felt like for a system this important that's going to be around for quite a few years, we wanted to make sure we get somebody who comes in that's been there, done that, and basically what have you done lately? You know, so we want somebody with good experience. So that'll be really important on the type of installations they've done and their experience. And I think that's pretty well outlined in the RFP. We also felt one of the things that we're going to do, and we've done this successfully in the past with a couple of other bids, is to have a mandatory bidder meeting. The fact that we've got, I think I counted 31 facilities that this will involve, and pretty major project. There's almost no way you can get everything spelled out in the RFP. So rather than constant barrage that we would expect of questions, we thought it would be important just to go ahead and have a mandatory meeting. Anybody who wants to bid will come, and it'll basically be a question and answer session. We'll take notes, and then we can, if we need to, issue an addendum. So they're all there and all here. Not to say they can't continue asking questions, but hopefully we can answer most of the questions that they might have at that meeting. And again, just to try to make sure in the RFP that we covered everything, that we get the functionality we want, but make sure we don't lose anything that we already have, especially when it comes to interfacing with dispatch and any of the functionality we have with our current system. And that's really all I've got. Didn't want to go into too much detail, but if you guys have any questions or...
Any questions? Mr. Fellow?
No, Mayor.
Thank you, Ben. We appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Gene.
All right. The next item on the agenda is the discussion of a revenue sharing agreement related to the WKU Gateway to Downtown Bowling Green Development Area and a development project proposed for Block 6. Mr. Fedlow?
I guess I would invite either Doug Gorman or Kevin Brooks up to make the presentation to you all. I'm not sure if Mr. Kelly is going to be joining us, but I think Kevin is going to make a proposal to you. I don't know what role you want staff to play, but we're ready to respond to our analysis of the proposal. But we thought it'd be right order for Kevin to make the proposal to you all. We have been in constant discussions with Kevin and Rick Kelly since the last time we met, but it would be appropriate, I think, for Kevin to make the proposal to you.
Thank you, Kevin. The revenue sharing agreement that you all have in front of you, I'm sure we all have the same version. The last one came to us all over the weekend, drafted by Bond Counsel Roger Peterman in Northern Kentucky. It does 2 or 3 things. We of course already had a revenue sharing agreement. It was very difficult to understand. The revenue sharing agreement, sort of, I guess, back up globally. I know you all probably understand this, but we've got we have these various documents setting up the TIF district and the commitment to provide incremental revenues to promote development in the TIF district. And those incremental revenues all come through the authority, not to the authority, but through the authority. And then the revenue sharing agreement, it fundamentally is just the agreement that says, okay, we've got these incremental revenues coming to us from 3 different governmental sources, and what do we do with it? And this is where we dedicate the TIF revenue going back out to support these various projects. This agreement is written, it's totally rewritten. It's a dramatically different format. Having said that, a lot of what is in here really does not change what was in the previous revenue sharing agreement. You, I believe, got a sort of a spreadsheet that showed a block by block detail. One of the things that this new revenue sharing agreement does is it addresses the disposition of TIF revenue on a block-by-block basis. So it does make it a little bit cumbersome still to read, but once you sort of read through it and see the format and see what we're doing, you realize that it's handy in that you can just say, okay, well, what's happening to the TIF revenue in Block 6? And you can go to it, and it will tell you. This spreadsheet takes all the language out and shows you just on a spreadsheet what is happening. And so you'll see that a lot of it has stayed the same. 2, I guess, fundamental things have happened. One in particular, before we get to the Block 6 stuff that's coming up, and that is, as you all know, we've paid off the bank bond. So the TIF revenue that was assigned to pay off those bank bonds is no longer necessary to do so, and that's dedicated to the county for the obligations it's supporting. And
Kevin,
yes,
you might, and I apologize to interrupt you, but if I don't ask it now, I'll forget it.
okay.
The money to pay off the bank bonds, where was that income derived from?
It came out of the, do you know, Gene? It came out of the parking garage bond indebtedness.
Oh, okay.
Right?
I think part of it came out of it, maybe part
It
of
may
it
be
out
part
of
of
the
it, the
Sky
Sky Pack. I don't have the breakdown, but I think
Okay.
primarily so
Was
the
that
money,
was that part of the 12 million?
the money was borrowed, yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's right.
Thank you.
So
What garage are we talking about? One up here?
the one down here, Block 6 garage.
Yeah, we were told like approximately $5 million came out of the Sky Pack issue and $1 million came out of the garage issue
Okay.
by Roger.
And I was not involved in the Sky Pack closing at all, and so I just was pleased when I heard they were getting paid. So a little bit more history about that, because the bank bonds really, way back when, were seed money that allowed us to do some things. Most particularly, it allowed us to buy real estate so we could build the baseball park that you guys paid for, and some real estate in Block 6. And the bank bonds were purely, again, kind of almost inconceivable right now, but purely a TIF-supported indebtedness. The county did not owe that money. The authority did not owe that money. The city certainly did not owe that money. That money, those bonds were to be paid back out of TIF revenue. So that was before the bad times, and so the banks that bought those bonds had enough confidence in the idea of TIF revenue from downtown that they bought the bonds. Again, a lot of that stuff didn't happen. We didn't sell TIF bonds and so forth. So getting the bank bonds paid off became really a major obstacle to development, because all of the TIF revenue in the old original TIF district was pledged to those bonds. And so the traditional method, what we see here today that we're doing in Block 6, where we're saying, here's some TIF revenue to help stimulate a development, we couldn't do that because the TIF revenue was all pledged to those bonds. So it was a really big deal for us to get those bonds paid off, because now, as you know, TIF revenue out of Block 6 is available to support Block 6 development. That wouldn't have happened before. So, which really kind of leads me to the other, I think, from the city's viewpoint, significant thing in the revenue sharing agreement, and that is that the city has moved up in the pecking order, if you will, so that the revenue from blocks 4, I want to get this right, 4A, 5, 8, and 10, those 4 blocks is available to support the Block 6 commercial development. So that's a significant change, and that TIF revenue is in front of the obligation the city would be assuming under its lease of the Block 6 parking garage.
And the TIF revenue from one of the tenants.
And the TIF revenue from, right, exactly. And there are other things ahead of the city's obligation. There's a debt service reserve fund, there's some capitalized interest and so forth. But
So we move up from, I don't know, 5th, 6th, 7th, whatever it is, last,
Kinda
whatever last
picture.
is.
Yeah, yes,
To second,
yes.
and then who's in front of us?
Well, second, really, first on those streams of revenue, first goes to the bonds that will pay for that, and then so in that sense, that's ahead of the city's obligation to have to pay anything. So that obviously very much benefits the city. But if there's more than enough, then yeah, the city is next to use. And the city, I think your summary says to use on the GO bonds, although I think the document actually says you can park it and use it for future debt payment on Block 6, or you can use it to pay on you can do whatever you want to with it, really, if there's more than enough TIF revenue.
What if there's not enough?
If there's not enough, the lease payment.
And the TIF revenue right now would be derived from the 2
It would be
leasing.
derived from all, well, right now.
And the 4, okay.
Right now, it would be derived from the 2, in Block 6,
Mm-hmm.
the TIF source of TIF revenue would be the 2 tenants that you're aware of,
Yeah.
and then, of course, any future tenants would be TIF generators. Questions?
Would it be accurate we're being moved up? Yes, but we're moved up to pay a debt.
Yes, sir.
I mean, you want to be clear about it.
The TIF revenue is being redirected to pay this debt.
And if there's enough to pay the debt, and hopefully more than enough, then we would actually realize the benefit. But we're being advanced to first position to have first debt.
That is exactly right.
Okay.
In other words, the downside for the city is that these sources of revenue that is ahead of your obligation are insufficient, in which case the city kicks in. The upside is that these sources of revenue is more than enough to service the debt, in which case the city benefits. And I think you've been provided with sort of, I've frankly only seen this today, but a variety of scenarios where if the remaining space, we know of 2 tenants, but we've got a lot more space there. What if 40% of that remaining space gets leased? What if 60%? What if 80%? So that you can see the effect it has on the city.
So we're moving up.
Yes.
We're moving up with the possibility of incurring more debt, but the likelihood of incurring that debt is much less.
I don't know if I would say it that way, to be honest. I mean, I think the city has some exposure here. One real interesting question that nobody really can answer is how quickly will this space get leased up?
How many square feet are we talking? And the percentages, I remember that. I have it here somewhere, but how many square feet?
Can I jump in here?
There's about, okay, sure.
Roughly 76,000 square feet.
Total?
to fill it up after the two tenants.
So that doesn't include
Correct.
the two
That's about
tenants
right.
that have.
That's after they're in there.
It's about 110,000 square feet.
There's about
leasable space.
110,000 square feet. Of that, about 68 or 69 is office space on the second, third, and fourth floors, and the balance is the first floor is bigger than the other floors, so there's more retail space.
And the difference in between those numbers is how much debt we would pay based if you lease 30,000 more square foot. That's where you come up with the percentages.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
And we're using the word debt, which I guess is correct, but don't forget what we will be doing. We're going to be entering into a sublease with the developers. So what the city will have is going to be an annually renewable lease. We're leasing the parking garage. The city's payment on that annual lease will be the debt payment of for the industrial revenue bonds. So the city will be obligated to make that full payment. That payment will be offset with lease payments and with allocated TIF debt.
But basically, we're backing the bonds, and technically it is a lease of the parking garage, but another technical part of it is we're backing the bonds.
That's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's right. And these sources of revenue, for instance, the rent paid by tenants in that building goes directly to the bond trustee. Doesn't even flow through a landlord. They have to pay it directly to the bond trustee so you don't have a risk that the landlord does something foolish.
And 100%, I think I'm right, 100% of the lease payments from everybody is pledged to this
Yes.
this payment.
Yes.
Of the regular payment that has to be made, that if it weren't made, the city would have to make, how much of that is already accounted for in revenue?
It's on that colored chart that I provided.
Yeah. Which I hadn't seen until.
Yeah, here you go, Kevin.
But
Currently about 2/3 maybe.
so I take that
Here it
to
is.
mean.
Okay,
Take that
I
to
found it.
mean, Jeff, with no other tenants at all. That's the deal.
We were trying to reduce the argument down to the simplest. This is all about risk and reward. And we wanted to develop a fair calculus of what the risk was vis-a-vis what the reward was, and do it in a simple way that can be understood. So,
I think it's close, and Kevin and Jeff can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think we're pretty close with the 2 pledged tenants and with the pledged TIF revenue. If the annual lease payment is what we think it's going to be, it's about maybe 2/3 covered at this point.
Yes, and I hadn't seen it figured this way, but I think I understand exactly what you all have done. And so what we've got, let's just talk about office space and forget the retail space for the moment. We've got about another 45,000 square feet that we could rent, and what these figures would say that if 2/3 of that gets rented, you're covered, roughly. Is that
Basically.
okay?
2/3 of the office only.
Yeah, if 32,000 of the 45,000 as yet unrented gets rented, then you're covered, and that's exclusive of any retail rent so obviously if it gets leased up beyond that, then you're making money.
That's at the $15 per square foot rate too.
Yes. Yeah, and there's a limited ability to lease below that. I think maybe 10,000 square feet could be leased as low as 12. Beyond that, it can't happen, I don't think, without your approval.
And how likely are we to rent it at $15 a square foot? And what is the availability to rent other space downtown at less than $15 a square foot?
I'm not, you're getting out of my field, but I just, from having heard an awful lot of discussion about this over the years, I will say that there's lots of space cheaper than that downtown. Some of it kind of remains empty. What we have lacked I think most of the experts would tell you, is available Class A office space. And so I think this is a reasonable market rate for that kind of office space. So to be able to predict the future market and how many people will grab this up, honestly, I think it would be unfair for us to say we know. We do know of 2 or 3 very fine tenants that we would have had if we'd have had a building. Even in the worst of times over the last 3 years, there's 1 or 2 for sure that would be in a building if we'd have had a building to rent to them. So if that trend's going forward, one could be reasonably confident that we're going to lease some more space.
I may be either ahead of you or behind you. I'm not sure at this point. The 2 tenants that we're talking about on the 25,000, that those rates for per square foot have been finalized.
Yes.
Okay. So
yes. Well, there's still some details remaining on one of those 2 tenants in particular on exactly how much common area maintenance they would pay. And one of the tenants has a little bit of a different arrangement on common area maintenance because it may in fact be a guarantor of the whole building anyway. So, but I think we're there on rent.
So if it's, I'm trying to get wrapped around this thing. If it's less, then that means the city's exposure is a little bit more. If it's what you think it is, then these figures are obviously close.
If you mean if it's less than $15,
or if it's less than,
I think these figures that Jeff has used assume the already agreed upon rental rates for those 2 tenants.
Okay. Okay.
Am I right?
That's correct.
Jeff?
Well,
Okay.
I think, yeah, one of them may have changed a little bit. I think at one time there was 20 and 15. Now they're both 15.
It
but
has.
but one of them
it's definitely evolved.
But one of them has a guarantee to make up the difference between the 15 and 20. So basically, they're 20.
Say that again. Say that again.
One of them, well, I think originally we thought it was going to be $20 a square foot. It's actually 15.
And $4 can.
$4 can.
Go ahead.
But they have a $5 guarantee that they have to provide or find. I forgot the term.
Premium rental rates or something like that.
Yeah, they have to find another premium tenant to come in to pay the $20 a square foot. And if they don't do that, then they're obligated to make up a cash payment between the difference of what they're renting at $15 a square foot and $20 a square foot. So at the end of the year, if they don't have that premium tenant there, then they have to make a cash payment, the way I understand this, to make up that difference. But their actual lease payment is $15 a square foot with a proposed penalty, if that makes sense.
No.
Okay, let me try it again. Let me you
They,
jump in.
the one tenant, which may very well also be a private developer, has an obligation to get some tenants at a higher rate, at a $20 square foot rate. And if they fail to do that, it's their obligation to pay that extra $5.
So they're getting the whole, we're talking about currently 2 tenants. They're
Yeah.
taking the whole space and subleasing that to the rest of them.
This would be the obligation of the private developer to lease out so many square feet, and I forget the number, at a higher rate to generate. It's forcing them to generate more income to in front of the city. And if they don't do it, they've guaranteed that money up to about $75,000 a year. So it's just another sort of insulator in front of the city.
It's like 13,335 square feet at $5 a square foot.
So if they can find somebody to rent, if they could generate rents from another tenant at that higher rate, good for them. If they can't, they owe it. And that's just another, as I say, insulator in front of the city.
And that space that they're renting is part of which pool? Is it part of tenant 1 and tenant 2's already existing
No.
space? It's
There would
part
be
of the
more-
other
there would be
space.
more space.
Okay,
Part of the as yet unrented space.
got it.
How much?
Pardon?
How much space in the unrented space?
Well, there's about 45,000 square feet of unrented office space, and they are, I'd forgotten the number, but I can't tell you exactly how this evolved, but they are obligated to lease about 13,000 of that 45,000 at a premium rate, just to generate more rental income.
And if they don't,
And if they can't, they have to pay that extra.
So they're paying $20 a square foot for 13,200 square feet, and then they have to bring in another 13,200 square foot tenant?
Yeah.
Okay. I just
That's
make
exactly
sure I
right.
understood there.
At
It
a
has
higher-
nothing to do with their lease.
at a higher rate than
It has
20?
to do with their obligation as a landlord to get a premium tenant in.
At 20.
At 20?
At 20. And
Oh,
if-
at 20.
And if they-
At 20. If they were to get it at, say, 18, they've gotten 60% of it, and so they're going to have to pay.
Got it.
It's
Is that
to make-
included in your
it's to-
calculations?
It's to make up the $5 on the 13,200 square feet, basically. You got to find another tenant to pay $5 more on that same 13,200 square feet.
But I think it's built
No,
into his.
On the same or on an additional?
Well, here's the
13,200?
way, here's the way it evolved. They were talking about paying 20, which is a high rate.
Yes, sir.
So they said, rather than pay 20, let us go out and see if we can find somebody else to pay 20. And then we've satisfied that obligation. But if we can't, we'll pay the difference.
Otherwise, Mayor, they could have, otherwise they could have stuck with their $20 per square foot, and the other 13,000 would have been leased at $15 like all the other office space. Right, Kevin?
That's right.
This is only to make up that $5 that we were counting on at the $20 rate.
But
Is-
the
is it-
effective rate at that 13,000 square feet is $20 a square foot.
That's right.
That is not reflected on here.
That was my next question. The
Because
other 13,000,
that's 13,000 additional as part of that 45 he's talking about.
Because it's
Okay.
not rented yet. But that 13, I think, tell me if I'm right, you roughly 32,000 square feet additional that needs to be rented.
That's, yeah, I backed into that at the $15
That's
per
at
square foot.
15. So
Yeah.
actually, if you rented 13 at 20, the number gets a little.
And you gotta be aware too that the debt service is not level debt service. It, as you can see, it's progressive. It goes all the way to 1,718,000 and 2036. So something has to grow on your revenue side, whether it be your lease revenues or your TIF, to keep up with your debt service.
Kevin, on your projected revenues, TIF revenues are 4A, 5, 8, and 10
Yes.
from those blocks. 4A is the empty block behind the chamber that's available for development,
No, 4A is the chambers.
the chamber side.
That's right. It's the College Street side of Block 4.
So there's already something being
So as
Generated from
payrolls
that.
go up there, there's incremental revenue going to be generated, yes.
All right, eight is the ballpark.
5 is Sky Pack.
5 is SkyPack,
10
10
is
is
BGMU.
BGMU, right? Yeah, 10
Right.
is BGMU.
If I'm reading that right. So the TIF money generated at SkyPack is going to go to help pay the Block 6 stuff and not the SkyPack
I
project?
think just part of it. Let's see.
No,
Block
I
5.
think it's all of it.
Because
Yes, that is right.
I was going to say, in your chart, it says
That is
that
right.
it's Block 6 commercial bonds, and then secondly would be city bonds.
That's right. That's right.
And of course, Sky Pack, that picks up everything, sales tax, which may be the biggest money part there.
So we're bumping the county out of the SkyPack money? Is that what?
As I say, I was not involved in the SkyPack
Okay.
financing, but the SkyPack financing got Block 7. And remains in Block 6. The county moved up on a lot of these as a result of the bank bonds being paid off. So,
They're counting sales tax and withholdings and property tax from Block 5 for SkyPack in these TIF revenue figures.
Does the fact that the 4A is going toward this, does that hurt the rest of Block 4 in any way?
to be honest, 4A is not a big number right now.
Okay. So was that,
What
probably answers it.
What the vacant part about what we all call Block 4, which is only half of it.
Yeah.
The vacant part of it is still available. So if we got a project tomorrow we could say, well, how much TIF revenue do you think your business will generate? And we could work with, this agreement would allow us to do that, because it's not promised.
I think I'm up to date so far. Keep
Okay,
going.
okay.
Okay, 4A is what's already been developed.
Got it.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Using Jeff's outline of the risk-reward scenario, assuming you have the two known tenants doing what they're supposed to do and finding that additional revenue, and we get the 72% TIF, and it's all applied toward the mortgage that we're asked to assume or to indemnify, to be bound to. Would you agree we would need 32,000 square foot more rented at $15 a square foot to reduce the city's risk to nothing or a nominal amount?
Yes, I just saw these numbers, but I certainly trust Jeff's math, and that makes perfect sense to me, just looking at it.
Okay, and who was responsible for making sure that that 32,000 square foot is rented up, and what incentives are provided? Will it be the Chapter 58 protecting the city, or will it be someone else who's incentivized to protect the city?
Well, it would be the private developer, because the private developer will be the landlord for the whole building. And then there is a safeguard in there if they're not doing their job. We can fire them and become the rental agent. I don't know that, frankly, the authority wants to get into that business, but that remedy is there. I doubt the city does either. I think if the private developer turns out to be who we think it's certainly going to be, then just even as a practical matter, they want that building vibrant and full because of their own business, because there they are, you know. They also have the motivation on the back end that if they want the building, they're gonna, and you as the city have to kick in a bunch of money, they're gonna have to write a very large check, and so
there is a financial incentive for them to do good and to reduce our risk.
There is that very definite incentive. There's not an incentive in the sense that they get a commission or anything.
I understand.
But there is that. On the back end, actually, it's an enormous incentive.
God forbid that we have no more than the two known tenants. Would the city still be contractually obligated to make any payments shortfalls after we use the capitalized interest and debt reserve? I think it will take us, 3 years?
Approximately.
Would we be contractually obligated?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, again, this is going to be an annually renewable lease,
Yes.
but we've never failed to annually
Right.
renew one of those.
Right.
I'm not sure how well
Like a
it looks.
non-appropriation clause, that's our out?
That would-
We would have to declare
would
bankruptcy,
kill-
so to
Yeah,
speak?
that would not be a good
kill our
solution.
bond rating
Kills
if we
your bond
defaulted
rating,
on that.
so
Same
that's-
thing.
It's not a good solution.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
You brought up something, Jeff. How does this affect our bond rating?
I have not approached our bond counsel with this yet. I can. I think it's a moral obligation. Basically, it's similar to the annual renewal that the county has with us on the ITA. If they ever defaulted on that, they would take the hit. I think it's pretty similar. But I don't know that it affects our rating just straight up, but it's a kind of a contingent liability that's sitting out there. But I can get an opinion if you want me to, but
I think I would like to have one if that's the...
okay.
Staff's role today was not to make a normative judgment on this, just to clearly identify the risk and reward, and in your role, determine if that was something that you guys were comfortable with. That's as simple as we thought our role was. And Jeff, I think, should be complimented for reducing what was an intensely complicated thing to a one sheet analysis. I think that is just lays it right out there, I think.
Kevin, when we're, and again,
Mike, Kevin, or?
No, I'm sorry, Mr. Brooks. When were you wanting, or when did the authority want this actually on the agenda for a vote?
We really need to do any tweaks we're going to do and be back in 2 weeks or whenever your next meeting is. For
2 weeks.
Yeah.
I understood yesterday they may have ordered steel or something. Or?
Well, they're ready to. I mean, they've kind of pushed it as far as they can push it without getting the financing.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. So the two tenants are basically waiting on action by this board to finalize the documents, basically.
What happens is, yes, and your approval is critical to being able to sell that industrial revenue bond. So, the tenants are more than anxious to get in this building. So
it may be a little bit reverse what you said. In this order we did 2 weeks ago, contingent. Our approval was contingent upon us receiving executed lease agreements from those two tenants. Because I think we want to make sure those tenants were online before. You'd always think who jumps first, but this order said that those would be in place before we move forward.
Yeah, that's right. Those leases are not signed. I'm quite confident in the rent amounts, but we've got to do all that soon.
And this has nothing to do with the parcel just recently sold, where on the backside, I guess.
No, and the triangular parcel
Yeah.
down here. No, it didn't have anything to do with that.
Just for the sake of disclosure, Gene has put down as your consular some points that you may want to consider in your deliberations later, whenever you felt comfortable.
I mean, I'll mention a few things, and these words I hate to use buzzwords, but
Do we have these written, Gene? I have so much paperwork here.
Yeah.
Do we have these written, or is this just verbal?
No, you got these, just hand them out just a minute ago.
All right, can I find it first?
Looks like that.
Is this something we need to
Good.
read over?
The first thing we talked about, one of the things that this makes clear is that the authority will have first shot at I think, up to 10% based on approved budget of the TIF revenues. Up to 10% of the TIF revenues go to the authority first for their approved budget. We just want to make sure you're aware of that, and whether that's too much, how that's figured, what's going to be used for. But make sure you understand that that's the first thing out of the box is the authority.
Can I interrupt there? Because I really meant, you're right. It definitely says that, and it goes kind of block by block and says 10%. That is actually, I believe, also a substantial benefit to the city, because it was really unlimited before. I mean, the revenue sharing agreement just said the first thing was authority operating expense. We don't really know whether 10% is too much or too little or whatever, but anyway, it's capped at 10% of TIF revenue.
And let me ask you a quick question there, Kevin. There's no blocks exempted from that. It's blanket for 50 blocks of the whole TIF district.
It is.
You all would get the 10% of the 80%.
That's right. And that's why you see on that document 72%, because the 8 or 10% of the whole is operating expense.
Does that 10% is a maximum cap? You'll be submitting a budget to us annually for approval anyway, is that correct?
We have to bring you a budget every year, yeah. And that's just, in addition to protecting the city, that, the authority doesn't do something crazy expense-wise, it also, it protects the purchasers of bonds. It makes the bondholder looks and says, well, all that's in front of us. Frankly, the bondholder's looking, it's your backstop which makes it saleable, but this assures them of a stream of income. And You know how hard it has been for the authority to come up with an annual operating budget. We're getting closer to sort of a period of stability. I don't think we know if that's what that number does, but it's more than we've had before. We haven't had a regular source of income, so it's helpful. Sorry to interrupt.
Just by sense of full disclosure, that's what we charged off to the CBG program. So we talked staff-wise, at least I brought it up there. I thought it was a comfortable amount, but it begs the question, if the 150 is reached, what will the administrative money be used for after the goal is realized? And you guys aren't responsible for the wrap, finishing the wrap, but the developer is. What would that money be used for, the 10%?
Legal fees, accounting fees. We've got a fairly
audit, things like that.
We have an audit, and frankly, we have 3 entities, and they're all audited, but the authority is really the only one of those entities that has any income, and so we're going to be paying for multiple audits on an ongoing basis, and we have I don't know if we know exactly how we're going to handle this, but we have a substantial record keeping and reporting requirement going on through. Jeff does a whole lot from your side, but we've got to send reports to Frankfurt, and so all of those things. This is just Kevin's guess, but I could certainly see someday a staff person that just did that. Right now, frankly, the master developer does it, but it's not really its obligation. It's ours. So,
Kevin, a question pertaining to the master developer. Anything that is built in the TIF district, the master developer gets a percent, regardless of who's building what, gets a percentage. Is it the same percentage for each project, or does it vary?
It's just based on capital development. Doesn't matter the nature of the project.
So if the nursing school goes into the hospital sometime in the future, the master developer will get a percentage of
the capital investment.
The capital investment.
Not to go past December 31st, 2014. I think that's when the compensation agreement ends, or 300 million, like whichever comes first.
That's the date by which we must reach the threshold. I think it goes farther than that.
Make check. I think the compensation agreement that we looking at, I think it says it ends either 300 million or December 31st, 2014.
It does. I think you may be right. Yeah. And I don't think we're going to get to 300 million. So.
But the percentage, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's 1% up to 200 million and 1.5% everything past.
Plus a $500,000.
At 200 million.
Yeah, bonus or whatever that's called.
Yeah. And that goes for Grace Gilbert Clinic or anyone else?
Anything in the 100-acre or 300-acre TIF area. Just a couple other points.
If I can,
okay.
The interrupting part, I apologize. So explain the 2014 issue again. Kevin says probably not going to reach obviously the 300 million, but at 2014, on January 1st, 2015, what happens?
The actual official TIF project is over because the deadline.
I'm relying on Gene's memory about that date, but there is and let's say that, so I'll assume that's the date. What that means is that capital investment past that date won't result in any compensation to the master developer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will what now?
Will not result in any further payment to the master developer once that date is hit, and I've forgotten the date. So.
But the TIF revenues should still be pledged for another.
Oh yeah.
20
the TIF
years.
agreement goes to 2020.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Again, I'm sorry.
Okay. A couple of things I probably need to talk to Kevin and maybe the bond counsels, but their bond counsel wrote this document, so probably need to talk to you about Graves Gilbert and medical center language because I'm still a little bit confused about the language going to those two entities. The future financings, we've gotten, I guess, conflicting, answers on this question. In the original TIF district, there's language that says the county's first, then there's future TIF financings up to 44 million. I think at one time we said that we were told that 44 million, I'm sure it makes a difference, but it includes the SkyPack, county SkyPack, and the garage. And then yesterday on a phone call, we were told it didn't, that 44 million. So there may be a difference between 44 million and 16 million, where that number is. We're just trying to figure out what that correct number. There's a big difference, I guess, between being third in line between 16 million and being third in line behind 44 million. And we're just trying to get an answer to what that number is. I think Jeff was told one time that 44 million included the parking garage downtown and the county SkyPack money. But we were told yesterday by bond counsel that didn't. So we're trying to figure that out.
First I've heard of that question.
Okay.
My general understanding, the last time we did actually a financing plan, was that future financings 44 was, I did not understand that it included SkyPack, but I could have been wrong about that. I thought it was Block 6 and Block 4. And
I'd taken notes from the meeting that I had with you, Rick, and Doug, and I asked that question. The answer was yes in the meeting, but
I believe you.
maybe it was
We'll
misunderstood.
answer the question.
It may be a meaningless question. We're just trying
Yeah,
to
it's getting in line for the leftovers, basically.
It
so.
is.
Yeah. There is a section 5.1. This one brings to your attention. It basically says, in the original TIF district, which is about 100 acres, that in the undesignated blocks, which like, for example, Block 4, that the authority is given the ability to allocate those TIF funds pretty much the way they want to, what notice does, without our approval. I just want to make sure you're aware of that. You know, TIF, for example, Block 4, everybody hopes, I guess, will be the next big block. If any of them will be Block 4, for example. But you know, I just want to make sure you're aware of that. When, a couple weeks ago we talked about control authority and everything else. But I mean, not to say they do it, but I read this to mean they could use those funds if they needed extra administrative fees, because I'm not sure that cap is 10 for that. But I just want to make sure you're aware that's what that paragraph says. The TIF revenue allocation, talked about just briefly, because everybody knows it, but want to make sure that everybody's aware with the county now paying off the bank bonds and doing their own. The county did it was about 12 million revenue bonds for the parking garage in Block 6, and about 18 million or so in GO bonds for SkyPack. They've now, of course, moved in several areas in some of these blocks first in line for payment. Other in the original district, other than blocks 4A, 5, 8, and 10, they're first in line. Well, except for 12B or whatever, and 14, the western blocks. But they're first in line for everything else. Just want to make sure you're aware of that. And I guess maybe the last thing, I think that's about it.
Before you leave that, Gene, it's split 50-50 between the city and the county for their bonds on all of the expanded TIF area. Is that correct?
Well, except for the medical center and Graves Gilbert blocks.
Right.
Yeah, except for those two blocks. Well, and then some of it goes to the, I think you're right. Some of it may go to the authority for one of their debts unless they buy that debt or something. There's some language like that too. But I think mainly those undesignated blocks in the expanded are split 50-50.
And
That's right.
That would be dedicated for those two sources unless you came back to us.
Yeah, but now understand that excludes the medical center
And Graves Gilbert.
So
Yeah. I think last year
right
they
now
didn't
we're not
produce
talking
much.
about anything very profound, but
Those are
over
the-
time, the stuff develops.
Those are the two big producers in the expanded district. Those two are our two main producers in the expanded area.
So if you got maybe a new major private medical office, that would be a generator. But right now, honestly, those are probably not big numbers.
Yeah, but
Jeff,
there would be the authority would not impound those funds for any other project without
They couldn't.
an adjustment to the revenue sharing
Yeah,
agreement.
they cannot. The only thing 5A does, it gives them the ability to do the undedicated lots in the original TIF.
Right.
Which is the first
That's why I wanted to clarify.
16 blocks or where those are.
But one more question on that. This states if SPE1 doesn't have a note payment, do we know what the SPE1 debt is that would apply here in
Well,
the
that's the
expanded
new
district?
market tax credits structure, and that goes away in about 4 years. It's
Okay.
pledged to that right now, so we could not pledge it anywhere else.
But there's no payments, it's just,
No, it's not actually getting any TIF revenue, but it is a pledge.
Yeah.
So that will automatically go away in 4 or 5 years.
In about less than 4 years now, I think, yeah.
So it's not really a debt.
and I had
Not
like,
anything we hope to ever have to pay.
Okay,
Right, yeah,
okay.
you're right.
and I think on this agreement, I had like one other comment, and want to make sure everybody's aware. This was kind of a new concept that we hadn't seen before, but in Block 6, which is the wrap, some of the tenants, I'm not sure which ones is going to be up to the authority, but some of the tenants will have the ability, I guess, depending on what the authority agrees to do, to provide them some of their TIF revenue, I guess, as an incentive, inducement to move there, or where the term may be. So you know, for example, tenant 2, I think I've seen a number that they've been promised 35% of the TIF revenues that they generate that will basically be paid back to them as what inducement to locate there to help them make their lease payment, or whether, you know, what it was going to be used for. I think it's up to 35. The one thing says up to 50, but I think I've seen an actual document that says they're promised like 35%.
It's half of the 72%,
That's right.
basically.
So it's 36% or 50%, depending on which
50,
number you're-
yeah.
If they get X amount of dollars in TIF revenue, tell me what that, I'm not listening, I don't think, as
Well, I
fast
guess if
as I
it's
need to.
36%, they generate $100,000 in
Yeah.
TIF revenue, about $36,000 that would be paid back to them.
How does that affect the figures that you prepared?
I based mine on the 72%. I went ahead and took the authority's 10% of the 80% out. It's
Let's go back to
Let me throw it at you
5.1.
another way. Let's say there's $100,000 incremental generated. 80% of that is $80,000. The authority would get to keep 10% of that $80,000 or $8,000. That leaves $72,000. Half of that $72,000 would be eligible to go back to the tenant. The other half would go towards the county bonds. Does that make sense?
That did.
It does for a minute.
I should let him speak.
It doesn't leave me.
That was a long way home.
It's
But
like
But-
algebra
but
class.
that
I
made
understand
sense.
it when I'm sitting there.
Yeah,
when I leave the
that-
room.
and just to reiterate, that the tenant is only getting TIF revenue that it generates. It gets,
Right.
you know, it doesn't get other TIF revenue in the blocks in general. But if you have, you know, the tenant can demonstrate through its payroll records how much of that TIF revenue it actually generated, and it's getting 36% back to what it does is it reduces their effective rent.
it's basically giving them a rebate back of their state taxes.
That's right.
That apply.
And after all this is over and we've gone through all this, then the tenant has the wrap. They have everything, right? I mean, everything is deeded to them.
The private developer.
The private
Correct.
developer.
Correct. When the IRB is retired, the private developer is the owner, with the proviso that if the city has had to pay money under this arrangement, they got to pay you back before they get their deed. That's the only condition.
One more time, please.
When the debt, when the bonds are paid off, industrial revenue bonds are paid off, then the private developer is the owner of the wrap, the whole wrap, which is a bunch of individual condo units, but it's the owner of the whole wrap, and doesn't have to write a check to anybody for that, except in the case where the city would have been required under its garage lease to make payments on the debt. Got to pay you back in full. So if over the course of, say this happens 15 years from now and the city spent $4 million to help pay for the bond debt, then the private developer would have to cut the city a check for $4 million.
What if they walked away, though?
They can walk.
Without paying?
They can walk.
Without paying?
Yes. But they don't get the building.
But then we get the building.
You know, who gets the building? The county has title to it, but the authority doesn't want it, I can tell you that.
But all that's addressed in the operating agreement.
It is. It is.
And we haven't had a chance to read it. We just got this afternoon, so.
I know. Let me be sure about that one. I guess I would just offer that it would have to have been a remarkably unsuccessful project for the private developer not to want it for $4 or $5 or $6 million, because it's going to be a building worth 20 or 30 million at that point. They could buy it and sell it. You know, they could buy it and flip it. Worst case scenario, they could find them a buyer. So.
I probably missed this somewhere in here, and I'm sorry. We're talking about the city backing this, basically. What is the private developer on the line for? What are they backing in this arrangement?
Well, all of that risk of the property of the building not being rented, their biggest risk is building maintenance that they would have to maintain. They would have to pay the CAM for everybody, if you will, whatever it takes to keep the building maintained.
They're the marketer, the maintainer.
Yeah.
They are putting, is it $250,000 letter of credit?
They got to put up $250,000 up front, and if the CAM's not sufficient to pay, they got to.
What is that? Is that the reason? And I'm just skimming. Is that the reason their CAM was dropped to 50 cents a foot?
Because they're on the hook for it anyway. Right. That's exactly right.
All right.
And the reason it's 50 cents a foot, just to be clear, is that the projection is that 50 cents out of the $4 is going to a maintenance reserve, a long-term maintenance reserve. So they're saying we got to pay that in. Everybody's got to pay that in. But the other $3.50, if you will, is ongoing, normal CAM expense, and the private developer is on the hook for all of it.
So the draft I saw, the CAM was at $2. Is it now at $4?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, except for the other tenant that we're still talking to them. We've gone back and forth from them about whether there's going to be an escalator or a cap, or so we're not finished with their CAM.
I think I'm done.
I don't know. I got a lot of reading to do.
Can I jump in with just one other miscellaneous item, Kevin? Yeah. The deadline for us to pay you guys annually, that June 1st, June 30th deadline, I think Roger Peterman amended that somewhat, but if you all give me a deadline to pay you by June 30th of every year for the prior calendar year, it's going to be a partial payment.
Yeah.
So I
actually wondered about that.
I need you all to work with me on that a little bit, because
you got final returns.
Because I got net profit returns that don't come until October with the extension. So
right.
So whatever we need to do a little bit talking about that, but it's minor.
I think we can work on that one.
I guess, last thing, at the end of it, you're right, there's a lot of reading. I think you've got 3 more documents to look at, too. There's the garage lease, there's the operating agreement, and there's also a sublease agreement. And, of course, we've not seen any of the bond documents yet. I'm not sure we'll have to, since we're not issuing the bonds, but everybody understands that all this stuff, I guess, for the parking garage and the wrap and everything will be mortgaged. So if the payments aren't made, we'll have mortgage companies out there as well. But
well, the parking garage is already mortgaged.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay.
But where would we be as far as the wrap goes? Would we have a mortgage? Would we have first, or?
I don't think that they're gonna. I don't think that.
If we have to make any payments.
would the trustee have some type of mortgage?
I don't think that the bonds are requiring any mortgage. So I don't think there would be anybody ahead of you. I'll double check with that. I don't think there is a mortgage on the wrap. I'm pretty sure that's the plan at this point.
Anyone else?
Well, so obviously there's some risk here. And we are basing that risk, or trying to think of it as minimizing that risk based upon a private developer doing what they're supposed to do. And obviously they have an incentive to do what they're supposed to do. But we're basing our risk on them doing that, but we have no control beyond, we don't have any control. of anything on Block 6?
Well, you do.
Or is that too simplistic?
Well, you don't have a lot of control over in terms of the other levels of insulation that would be provided for the city. It's all about getting those spaces rented.
Right.
And no, you're not in charge of renting those spaces.
Right.
I mean, ultimately, if they default, you can kick them out, and there are remedies. But in the way more likely scenario, any likely scenario at all, it's the private market filling those spaces.
Yeah. And I guess
and
I mean
go
in
back to what-
control. I guess what I was referring to was the cost or the pricing or anything.
Yeah, there are some protections in there. It's set at $15
Okay,
per foot.
that's where that comes
That's
in.
right.
Okay.
And go back, we talked about it a little bit. I mean, there is obviously an incentive for the developer to lease this, because once it's done, they get it, which is a major incentive. Because once this is paid off, it's going to be deeded to them. But we've now added language in too that if the city had to pay anything in between, they won't get that deed until they reimburse the city. So if the city's had to pay out $2 million, heaven forbid, over 20 years, part of the condition on that developer getting that deed is they reimburse the city $2 million. If they care about the deed.
I guess I would just turn around one little thing, and that is there's certainly no disincentive for them to. There's heaven knows they want to rent the space. They want it to be a successful project, and it makes the value of that building that they're going to own someday better and all that. So.
I guess another issue, and this thinking out loud is very dangerous for me. But we are going to incentivize a private developer. They're going to move, but then we're going to potentially free up office space that someone is renting to them now, and they're going to end up losing a tenant or tenants, whatever how that works out.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of if I was that landlord and we're having government come in and help move some people out of their building, then they're stuck with maybe they're stuck with a mortgage payment. And again, if I'm thinking along the
Well,
wrong.
no, I understand that question completely. A couple of things. First of all, there's no getting around the fact that TIF revenue will help these tenants.
Right.
That is true. Having said that, the question that you just raised is why we have tried so very hard to make this a private developer building and not the authority being a land. Then the government is in direct competition. I can speak with some authority as to both of these particular landlords and say that both of these companies were moving anyway, without question. So, I mean, they have to. They need more space, and they want Class A space. So, and in fact, I mean, Bill, that's why I guess we've said this before, but that's really what has driven this whole thing is that I've mentioned that we've lost tenants, and we have. So now we've got two really good tenants, and we just can't keep losing them. We just felt like time to go.
So, Kevin, basically, you're in a way saying that the authority has granted permission, or you're basically pledging TIF revenues to the developer, and the developer can pass on these TIF revenues to tenants. Is that the way you're working it?
Yeah,
As the private developer?
They can, the way we've negotiated in the past has been that the prospective tenant could we'd say, all right, you can have X TIF revenue back, or we can just set your rent now. Get any TIF, we'll keep it. And these tenants generally have kind of liked the idea that their business will grow, and we'll take the TIF revenue. They could have said, well, we're not going to take any, there's not going to be any more TIF revenue. We'll just give you a rate.
And I'll only pay you $10 a square
and
foot.
we'll only pay, yeah, exactly. So we would rather, actually I think we'd rather do it this way, and both of these tenants are relatively new and certainly growing businesses, so they like the idea of the TIF revenue.
I have conceivably just one more question. The 5.1 section in here and what you gave us, talk about that the authority could use the revenue. There's no way of knowing how much revenue that would be, right?
Well, it's limited, again, it's limited to the undedicated blocks in the original TIF district, which, what's dedicated? 4A, 5, 8, 7, 10, 12, 14.
Four's not.
Yeah.
That's the big one out there.
Yeah.
But I guess as the staff attorney, tell me if this is a concern that I should have. Again, you have an authority, and goodness knows I respect the people that make up that board. But they have an ability to spend more money at their discretion and not at the discretion of elected officials.
That language says they would give you notice and not approval.
But we have to approve the subdeveloper agreement for that block.
I don't guess I understand both of those separately, but then again, why would the authority why would the Chapter 58 have the authority then to spend monies that have not been approved by either the city or the county, I guess? Unspecified funds.
Philosophical question.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's sort of the idea of TIF from day one, that we would spend TIF revenue. There are all kinds of big picture controls. We're audited. Come to you with a budget. We come to you every quarterly. If we do this, most likely, almost inevitably, it would be a subdeveloper agreement. So you got to approve that. So, but the document that would pledge the TIF revenue to that subdeveloper, the way this is drafted, if it's revenue that has not already been pledged, we don't need your permission.
And I guess I'm not talking about you all buying pencils and paper clips, but I am a bit concerned, I think, and I'm gonna have to.
We can't spend it on administrative expense.
Could the authority write a check to whomever they please? Could they write it to the master developer?
No.
Could they write it to? I'm trying to get my.
I think it's within the guidelines of what you see in the revenue sharing agreement and in the operating agreement and the master developer agreement. They can't go beyond the bounds of those, but we have already as a commission approved granting them 80% of any additional revenue that comes in, and we're relying on their judgment to dispense those to entice developers to come into that part of the community, whether it's through parking, curbs, sidewalks, infrastructure, or if they want to turn around and rebate that to help offset their costs.
But that language doesn't say they could not use it for administrative expense. They may not, but the language doesn't say you can.
Well, it talks about
approving a budget within an approved budget.
But won't the developer fee have to come from the admin? How else are they going to get paid? Where is it going to come from?
It's gonna.
It's got to come from your 8%, doesn't it?
Or out of a future financing. That's how they've been paid so far.
Can that same pot of unencumbered money, uncovered blocks, be used to indemnify us now with the RAP? Give us more blocks? To provide...
They're not, of course, they're not generating any money right now.
But they could. And we're on the hook for 25 years, so why not provide additional blocks as a greater hedge?
Or split them.
Yeah, it's all about reducing our risk.
I don't know. And Melinda and I are probably, Joe and Bruce and Slim have been in the beginning. I tell you, coming in, it's been more difficult. Some of the things that you all know from just communicating in the past and trying to catch up has been a little difficult. But I appreciate your patience in answering my questions, at least. I'm finished.
Anyone else?
I'm not sure all of us know that.
Appreciate you being Well, you said that there is a risk. That was, there is.
Anything else?
Feel free to directly or through staff feed us questions, because we, as I warned you, we're coming back.
Well,
We want to get this approved if we can.
you can count on us having considerable questions, because like I say, we didn't have an opportunity to review the material that was handed out as we sat down, so that's why a lot of us were confused on the questions we were asking. So
There was a request to approve this tonight.
we will, can we go ahead and preliminarily schedule this on the work session too, just in case we've got any questions
but there was,
that we didn't get?
We were pointed towards that, but we realized several days ago that wasn't there.
Kevin asked to put it on for a vote tonight, and in my wisdom, I convinced him that we should chat about this a little more, right?
Yeah, that's fine.
So,
Thank you.
Will there be any
So it
additional
won't be-
changes?
Will be nothing on pertaining to the TIF tonight.
yeah, there is.
To revenue.
Not to this item.
Can I ask some questions, please? Is it your will that it go on for another work session and not be placed on the agenda for a vote until all the issues are addressed at the work session?
I think that's true, but I anticipate that happening, so I don't want to tell them it'll be a month before we decide this.
No, we'll do it next meeting.
Yeah,
Do you
right.
want to put on for a vote, first reading? We only need one reading now, right?
With the understanding, if we're not
If you don't like
comfortable
what you hear at the work session,
right,
you
we can withdraw.
We can abort it. So you want to put it on both, and we
Okay.
can abort if we don't, okay.
Yes, because I want to avoid as many late file agenda
Yeah.
items as we can for
Yeah.
the
Okay.
appearance of impropriety.
All right.
Yeah.
So we'll put it on both, we'll discuss it, and if there is not unanimity, we can pull.
Correct.
Cool.
Fine with me, yes.
That'll work.
Got it. Thanks.
Anything else to come for the body? We'll be back at 7 o'clock for our regular session. Thank you for tuning in.